As time goes on, I'm less interested in buying gear that simply does one more thing. I'm more interested in buying gear that gets out of the way. And that's exactly why I bought the GVM 1200B AIO. Not because I needed another 1200 watt COB, but because I wanted to know whether an all-in-one design could actually make production easier. Because every extra cable, every extra case, every extra setup step, and every extra minute, they all add up over the course of a production, especially when you're working as a small crew. That's one of the reasons this light caught my attention. After using it on a real commercial shoot, comparing it against my Aputure 1200X as a benchmark, and putting it through a pretty extensive round of testing, I think I finally have an answer. On paper, an all-in-one fixture solves a lot of those little problems. No external ballast, no head cable, and a smaller overall footprint to move around. But solving one problem doesn't automatically make it a better light. So instead of sitting here reading you a spec sheet, I wanted to answer a few simple questions. Does it actually make production easier? How does it compare to my Aputure 1200X? Is the output there? Is the color there? And after using it on a real client production, would I actually trust it enough to keep reaching for it? So let's find out. The first thing you'll notice is just how simple it is. Open the case, put the yoke on a stand, attach the head, plug in one power cable, and you're ready to go. Compared to something like the Aputure 1200X, you've eliminated the ballast, head cable, clamping the ballast, and more things to pack up at the end of the day. That's exactly the kind of friction I'm talking about. Now there is a trade-off. All of that weight, it now lives on the fixture itself. So once it's overhead, your controls aren't conveniently sitting on a ballast at waist height anymore. You're reaching for the fixture, you're using the app or controlling it over DMX, but that requires an additional purchase of a dongle. Personally, I think that's a worthwhile trade-off most of the time, but it'll depend on how you work. One thing I do wish is that the yoke fit inside the case while still attached to the fixture. Right now you have to install it every time you take the light out. It's only another few seconds, but it would make an already fast setup even faster. Of course, that fast setup, it doesn't matter if the light doesn't perform. So instead of doing all of my testing in the studio, I used it on the footage that opened this episode. For this project, I used the 1200 through a window as my key light motivation, and supplemented it with a few smaller fixtures inside. Now it handled that role exactly how I'd hoped. Plenty of output, consistent color, no surprises. Honestly, that's probably the biggest compliment I can give any piece of gear. Once the camera starts rolling, you stop thinking about it. After the shoot, I wanted to see if my impressions lined up with the actual measurements, so I compared it directly against my Aputure 1200X using my Sekonic C-800. I'll leave the measurements on screen for a few seconds if you'd like to pause and take a closer look. Compared to the Aputure, the GVM measured a little lower in output, both bare and with the standard reflector. Nothing unexpected, just enough that it's worth mentioning. Color quality though, it kind of impressed me. The CRI and TM30 tint and overall color accuracy landed right where I would expect from a professional fixture. Not quite at that 1200X level, but that's to be expected at this price point. Then I ran into something I wasn't expecting. I started testing GVM's optional 3x intensifier, and the numbers, they didn't really make sense. Output wasn't where I expected it to be, and the color temperature shifted almost 300 Kelvin warmer. At first, I assumed that's just how this modifier performs, but the more I looked at it, the less it added up. So I started digging through GVM's documentation, and what I found is something I had completely overlooked. According to GVM's own documentation, the factory-installed Aurora Convex lens can be configured differently depending on which optical modifier you're using. I hadn't seen anyone mention this before, so I removed that lens and then repeated the 3x intensifier measurement. Immediately the output increased and the color temperature came almost perfectly back to 5600 Kelvin. Then I repeated the 30-degree reflector test without the lens as well and got these results. That sent me one step further. I wanted to know what the lens was actually doing. It has a measurable impact on how the fixture performs, so I spent some extra time testing it in a few different configurations. I'll leave these measurements on screen if you'd like to pause and compare them, but they definitely change how I look at that lens. It's a small detail, but one that's definitely worth paying attention to depending on the modifiers that you're using. Overall, there's a lot to like here. Setup is genuinely fast, the build quality feels solid. The app, although not as comprehensive as Aputure Sidus Link, does the job and the Bluetooth range is decent. The case is just fine. It won't hold up to rentals, but then again, not many of these rigid fabric cases do. And maybe, most importantly, it removes friction from the production process. There are still a few things I'd like to change. You give up that built-in DMX capability unless you purchase the optional dongle, and there's no weather rating on the GVM. The head being heavier, it means you need to be sure your stands can support it properly. I wish the yoke stayed attached inside the case, and I think GVM, they could make that lens removal step much more obvious because it genuinely changes the performance. So would I use this fixture on a paying commercial gig? Absolutely, and I already have. We actually pulled this out on a recent production in a similar fashion to our opening kitchen scene, and it performed well in that scenario too. And the biggest question of all, would I buy this fixture again knowing everything I know now? I think the answer is yes. Not because it's the brightest light in this class, not because it's replacing my Aputure. I'd buy it again because it solves a real production problem. It gets me from the case to shooting faster. And the longer I do this, the more I realize this is the kind of gear I want to invest in. Because every little bit of friction you remove, it gives you more time and energy to focus on the things your clients actually care about, what ends up in front of the camera. I hope this has been useful in some way, or at least given you a few things to think about. Also, we're still taking entries for our light giveaway from the last video, so if you're interested in some free gear, be sure to check that one out. Thank you so very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon.